Welcome to your first 49ers Live of the 2019 season. Now, I have good news and I have even better news. Well, football is back, number one. That's the good news. And even better news, we're joined by this guy right here, 49ers General Manager John Lynch. Coming off of a pretty busy weekend, you have 90 quality NFL players, narrowing that down to 53. Does that come with some sort of sleepless nights? Are you like racing to beat the clock on that Saturday 1 p.m. deadline?
It comes with many sleepless nights, not because you're cramming to do work, just because these guys have made an impression on you, and you understand that in some instances you're going to be making some dreams, in some instances you're going to be given some very disappointing news. And as I communicated around cut time this year, the hardest part this year is we felt like more guys than we were able to keep earned the right to be on this roster, and really did so emphatically. And so that was difficult. It is part of this business, though, and so you make the best judgments that you can, and you deliver it the only way I know how, which is looking someone in the eye and telling them what we've decided to do and why we've decided to do it.
Now, as a GM, your job is never done. You're constantly tinkering this roster. But now you have pieces in place that you didn't necessarily have in year one, year two. You have your quarterback. Now you've got help for DeForest Buckner on the D-line with the additions of Nick Bosa and Dee Ford. You're always improving, but is there anything now that you kind of step back and you look at the full picture following the initial roster cuts? Is there anything that stands out to you when you look at the roster?
Just excited. I don't think it's ever complete. I mean, this isn't the early 90s Niners where you could go out and just, be stacked at every position. We have a salary cap. It's made such that that there is great parity, and so nobody can go out and just build a super team. But I think we've had an opportunity to put it together in our likeness, with the type of guys we like in terms of what they represent. Both on and off the field, and we're closer to having done that. And I think the two areas, in terms of, you mentioned two guys, Bosa and Dee Ford, we think those guys are top-end players. We think they're finishers, but you have to have those impact players, but everyone's an impact player, and so you have to have great depth. And I think in both those areas, in terms of the frontline guys and the depth of this team, we're in much better position than we've been.
Let's jump right in. Let's jump right into the roster, and we'll start it off with quarterback. We'll go position by position and break down the 49ers' initial 53-man roster. At quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, C.J. Beathard. Mullins, we just found out on Monday, will back up Jimmy Garoppolo. You hope you don't have to see him at all this season. You hope your starting quarterback plays all 16 plus some. But Kyle Shanahan said earlier that it's hard to find three quality quarterbacks, and they come with a price tag. How did it come about keeping three of the quarterbacks on the roster? What was the thought process?
Well, we just felt like the situation was warranted. Obviously, Jimmy, we're thrilled to have him back. We believe Jimmy has everything it takes to operate at a high level in this league and be that franchise-type quarterback. We're thrilled having Jimmy. Nick Mullins right there came in last year, and I think the best thing I can say about Nick is anytime people try to put a limitation on him, he kind of blows right through that limitation, and then people kind of reset. And he's made of the right stuff in terms of the intangibles, but also the talent on the field. C.J. Beathard's a guy who we have a lot of belief in. We drafted him in the third round. Although the record and maybe the numbers don't indicate that, he's done nothing to disappoint us. We feel like we've worked and identified some things this offseason to work on. CJ came back a better player. He ultimately lost out to Nick Mullins, but that's more of a credit to Nick than anything CJ did wrong. But we do feel like we're in a position of great strength at a position where it's really good to be strong in this league.
All right, let's jump on. Let's hit the running back position. You've got Tevin Coleman, Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert, and we'll throw Kyle Juszczyk in the group as well. We got the unfortunate news of Jerick McKinnon, probably one of the biggest headlines this week. Setback re-aggravated his knee. Was placed on injured reserve. What went into the decision to put Jerick in injured reserve? Is he getting another operation done on his knee? What's the status on that?
He is. Jerick will have another procedure done on his knee. There were some mechanical issues that every time he got close just didn't allow for him to play. His knee would get irritated when you got to that last step, which was actually getting on the field and playing football. Incredibly hard for Jerick, obviously, incredibly hard for us. He's such a guy that you pull for because of his work ethic, because we had a real great vision for how he was going to help this football team. So that's a punch in the gut fortunately, we're very strong at that position. Tevin Coleman wasn't something we really set out in free agency to, hey, let's go get a top-level running back. Tevin kind of fell to us, and you know, I think we're real fortunate now with Jed out that we have a guy like Tevin to go along with Breida and Raheem Mostert to really give us a strong group.
Tevin Coleman coming off of a pretty strong training camp, one of the standouts over the month of August. All right, let's move forward. Let's hit wide receiver. You've got Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Hurd, Marquise Goodwin, Richie James Jr., Dante Pettis, Deebo Samuel, and Trent Taylor. Now, as I say this, I'm like, okay, are the names ever going to end? But this year, keeping 7 wide receivers compared to 6 years prior. But coming into week 1, we got the news Trent Taylor with his foot might not be on hand for week 1. Also, Jalen Hurd, his status is still up in the air. How much did the injuries take effect on the roster, especially heading into week 1?
Well, I think a couple of factors. Number 1, the injuries. Number 2, there were 7 and even more than that. And we lost a guy like Jordan Matthews that we released. But that's one of those positions we're talking about where more than you can keep earn the right to be on this roster with their play. And so could that adjust itself as some guys get healthy? Perhaps, but these guys are all in control of that as well by the way they go perform. So we'll kind of let that play out. 7 is more than we normally keep, but it's not unheard of in this league. And the fact of the matter, we had a lot of good choices and thrilled about some of the additions. You know, Deebo, Jalen Hurd are guys that are going to help this team a lot. And then Trent Taylor, having him back and healthy, you know, I think a guy who's improved himself even from where we saw him year 1, where he was a very effective player in this league.
You talked about some of the talent at wide receiver, and I want to touch on a couple of those guys. Richie James Jr. Battling out for one of those final roster spots, has been a standout on special teams. Also, Kendrick Bourne, Kyle Shanahan said, probably one of the surest hands in the receiver group. What did you see out of these 2 guys that made it feel like they had to be on this 49ers roster?
Well, Richie earned it. You know, he had that game in Kansas City, you know, and obviously a lot more goes into it than one game. But we've known about Richie and everything that he can bring. He's got a lot of the skills that we like on the field. He's got a toughness about him. He had really been able to show on special teams. As a receiver, he needed to take another step, and he did just that, and I give him a lot of credit. He was playing for his roster spot. He went out and earned it. Kendrick Bourne is a guy who, you know, you mentioned the hands. He's got very strong hands, very confident in his hands, and it allows him to run through a lot of in-break and routes. Kendrick has really grown his game, and you know, a real tough position. He knew the competition was going to be tough this year, and he went out and played well and earned a spot on this roster.
All right, let's move on to the 49ers tight ends. We all know about George Kittle, Ross Dwelley, Caden Smith, Levine Toilolo. Garrett Selleck on PUP can't return until week 6, if I'm not mistaken. A deep tight end rotation. Was the thought process behind that to kind of take the weight off of Kittle?
Well, I think when you say take the weight off Kittle, George Kittle is going to be on the field and be on the field a lot, maybe in the way we play Kittle. He is such a good blocker. Everybody knows about his receiving skills. He set records last year. But George can do everything. He can, you know, get in there and block defensive ends, and you have a propensity to want to do that when you don't have other options. We wanted to make sure that we went out and had other options. Levine Toilolo was a fortunate signing because he's a guy who can fulfill that role. Caden Smith is a guy we felt could be a complete tight end. Caden's improved a ton since he's been here, and we feel like he's got a lot of more room for growth. Ross Dwelley gives us a nice receiver. He's been a great you know, addition to our team since we took him as an undrafted free agent at a little USD down there in my hometown, and Ross has done a nice job. So we feel very good about that group as well.
All right, let's jump ahead to the 49ers O-line, probably the most fun group of the 49ers 53-man roster. Joe Staley, Mike McGlinchey, Weston Richburg, Mike Person, Laken Tomlinson, Ben Garland, Justin School, 49ers 6th round pick, and rookie Daniel Brunskill. Tough decision came in this group, letting go of former 1st round pick Joshua Garnett. Not easy by any means, but what went into the decision to part ways with Garnett?
Well, Josh Garnett, I think still has the opportunity to be a really good player in this league. His body has to allow him to do so. At one point during camp, I think some comments Kyle and I made were maybe misconstrued that we didn't believe in his toughness, his competitive nature. That's not it at all. We were just saying the reality, his body hadn't allowed him to be out on the field. And every player, and I think Josh in particular, is really a rep learner. When he had an extended period on the field, you'd start to see some of that talent that allowed him to be picked as a first rounder. And we were very intrigued with that. Unfortunately, it just never worked out where he could stay on the field. We're hopeful for Josh that he finds it. Early in my career, I was nicked a little bit. Then I went 8 years without missing a game, and so I told Josh some of those stories. Hopefully a new environment's good for him. But we are happy with our group. We're keeping 8, which is light. But we like the 8 that we have. Unfortunately, Sean Coleman went down in the preseason. We really felt like we had a luxury at tackle with obviously Joe and Mike McGlinchey. But Sean Coleman was playing like a starter. That was very unfortunate, but we like our group. Having Weston Richburg back to anchor that group in the middle is really a nice sight for us. We paid him a lot of money for a reason. He's a very good player, and he's a great fit for this system.
All right, let's have some fun and jump to your side of the ball. Let's talk defense, and we're going to jump directly across from these guys and talk about the defensive line. Obviously, one of the biggest storylines this offseason. DeForest Buckner, Nick Bosa, D. Ford, Eric Armstead, Solomon Thomas, a lot of first-round talent right there. DJ Jones, Ronald Blair, Julian Taylor, and Sheldon Day. Kentavious Street was placed on IR with designation to return after 8 weeks. Since the draft, obviously, a lot of talk about the 49ers D-line, a lot of expectations. How do you approach that? Is that something that you embrace?
Absolutely. And, we talked to those guys about that we're counting on them, and they know it, and they're all the type of guys that can handle it. It's not like we're telling one guy, you got to carry this group. There's a lot of guys there. Forget about where they were drafted, because just as much as those guys, all the first rounders, we have that belief. And DJ Jones, that was a 6th rounder out of Mississippi, out of Julian Taylor, that was a 7th round player. Out of Temple, and but we've got a lot of belief in that group. We've got very high expectations for them. Nobody does more so than their coach, Chris Kasarik, and he lets them know every day what he expects out of them. And those guys have to play at a high level for us to be the defense we know that we can be.
Nick Bosa rehabbing from his ankle from earlier in training camp. Practice this week after missing all of preseason. I don't want to put you on the spot, but can fans get excited about seeing him at the beginning of the season? I want to say week 1.
Yeah, we're hopeful. I will tell you that those are tough injuries for a defensive lineman to come back. You think about what they do. They're pushing against big people on a consistent basis, a lot of people around their legs, and then they got to have that ability, which Nick is so effective, of turning a direct line to the quarterback. But he's done a really good job with his rehab, which leaves us very encouraged.
Same thing with D. Ford. Fans looking for it to take the field. Is week 1. Can fans kind of look towards that, or is that something that still we'll see how the week of practice goes?
D. Ford is going to be fine. D's a Ferrari, and you don't want a Ferrari not running like a Ferrari, and so we wanted to make sure that he was full speed ahead, and he had some tendonitis that was in there. We wanted it wiped out, and when you see him at practice, I think everyone feels good that the right decision was made, because he is coming, he's fresh, and he's going to help this team out a lot.
Let's jump on to the 49ers linebackers. Quan Alexander, who will be making his return to his former team in Tampa this week. Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Mark Nazacha, and Azeez Al-Shir, undrafted rookie. But there's a number of storylines I guess we can talk about when it comes to this group, but I do want to talk about Azeez. He's a special kid with a very, very special story, beat out several veterans for a spot on this roster. In a conference call, you said he's somebody that we couldn't keep off the team. What do you mean by that?
He earned it. Every time he went out on the field, he showed us that, we feel very good about our linebacker spot. But he's a guy we believe that if he continues to hone the skills that he's shown in flashes, he's got starter quality ability to him at the linebacker position. His biggest challenge right now, we expect him to play at a high level on special teams right away. And that's not something he's done a lot of, but that's the expectation for him. You see Dre, another rookie, who's had a really strong camp, but we're relying on those two. We're only going with 5 at that position. Obviously, Quan, We spent a lot of money on Quan because we felt like he's the type of engine that can make a defense go, both in his skills and that spirit that he has. Fred is a guy who plays wise beyond his years, and then Mark and Zacha, a real special team standout who's going to be counted on defense as well.
It's a fun group. I like to watch the Hot Boys. That's what they call them.
The Hot Boys. Quan going back to Tampa, that's fun. I mean, my first year, I played there 11 years, went to Denver. My first year, we went back, and so I've been able to share some thoughts with Quan about how to handle that, and I'm excited for him. We just got to keep him down until Sunday.
How hard is that to keep Quan Alexander down until Sunday?
you don't do that real easily.
Let's jump to the 49ers defensive backs. Let's start with the corners. We have Richard Sherman, Akello Witherspoon, K'Wan Williams, Jason Verrett, DJ Reed Jr., and Emmanuel Mosley. They're tied in with our safeties, Jimmy Ward, Jaquaski Tarvarius Moore, and Anton Exum, who was signed earlier this week. Initially decided to keep 3 safeties, added Exum earlier this week. But you have the luxury of having the DBs who are interchangeable. You have Reed, who plays safety, Moore and Ward, who are safeties that can play corner. How did versatility play a factor into the way this DB group shaped out?
It's very important. You know, when you have these restrictions of numbers on a roster, 53, 46 on game day, you have to have some guys who can exhibit some versatility and position flex. And you just hit it with Tarvarius and Jimmy, who have played corner. With DJ Reed, who can play safety, it helps you a lot. And, that will be counted on at some point this season. We feel real strong about this group. I know a lot's been talked about what we didn't do. We like what we have done. And this group is one that I'm very excited. Verrett, we'll see early in the year, how he is coming off that injury. But here's a guy, we knew there was risk reward. He'd been injured a lot, but when healthy, this guy plays at an all-pro level. And so to be able to add a guy like that is something special, and we'll bring him along as slow as he needs to be. But at some point this year, we'll count on him and count on him in a big way.
Obviously, Verrett impressed during camp and preseason enough to earn himself a spot on the roster. And then finally, wrapping it up, we've got the specialists. I mean, there's no surprise there. We've got Robbie Gould, Mitch Wishnowsky, and Colin Holba. We're heading into a game 4 days away. First game of the year, 49ers heading to Tampa Bay to face the Buccaneers, heading back to your old stomping grounds. You just mentioned you talked to Quan about that, but this will be a fun test for the 49ers defense, or the entire team. The D-line coming along. You've got Jimmy Garoppolo playing in his first game in over 11 months. But with all of these storylines, is there anything that a 49ers general manager is looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to a successful season, and it's a tough ask to go into Tampa. God knows it's hot. I know it's hot. I used to say a prayer every day in training camp, just get me through today, and I'll be good. So that's just a fact. It's going to be. And so how do you deal with it? Mental toughness, physical toughness. We've prepared these guys for it. They're ready, and now, like I said, we got to go out there and execute. We got to be on the details. And I know Kyle and his staff will do a tremendous job having our team ready and just handling the emotions, all the excitement. But I think we're poised for a real fun year. And now it's, as they say, all the hay's in the barn. The preparation continues, but now we just got to go do this.
Do you have any tips of dealing with this Tampa Bay humidity?
Learn to love to be miserable, so.
Learn to love being miserable. John, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the very first 49ers Live of the 2019 season. This Sunday, 49ers first game of the year, week 1 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Raymond James Stadium. Kick is at 1:25. You can catch that on Fox or streaming from the 49ers app or 49ers.com. John, thank you again.
Thank you, Kim.
Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you guys on Sunday. Enjoy the week.